I want to share a profound piece of insight and realization that came to me over the last few months, and I was able to distill it into a poem. So here's the short poem. There is nothing to cling to. Clinging is based in fear, and fear is illusory. Release into faith. Bask in the essence of love. So that idea of having nothing to cling to, that really was, that idea was catalyzed within me when I did ayahuasca in late January, early February of this year. I did it in the jungle of Peru in the Amazon, the middle of the Amazon, with a phenomenal organization called Blue Morpho. And I've talked about this before. But during the first ceremony, I had this intense realization about there being nothing to cling to. And that's one of the core messages. And I wasn't really able to fully wrap my head around it until recently. So it's taken months for me to really assimilate how profound it's been. So I'll tell you about the experience of the first night, my first ayahuasca ceremony. So your first ayahuasca ceremony it's essentially like greeting and getting to know the plant medicine and the spirit of ayahuasca. And if you're not too familiar with ayahuasca, do a little research so you can familiarize yourself with ayahuasca and plant medicines and things like that. I won't go into that because that's beyond the scope of this video, but I'll just tell you about my experience. So the first night, it was really interesting and way more physical than like tripping out and hallucinogenic. So the plant medicine really didn't hit me fully until after the ceremony ended. So when people were getting up and talking to each other, some people were walking out, I was like almost incapacitated and like it was just a really weird feeling, like I was tossed into a washing machine, just spinning. I couldn't formulate any logic. I had no idea what was going on. It was really weird. And it wasn't too crazy with visuals. Yeah, like some shadows were on the walls and dancing and things looked slightly distorted, but it wasn't too crazy. It was more physical. So I like couldn't get up. I couldn't really talk. And my logical brain was just like paralyzed basically. It was a really really weird feeling, and it was a bit scary, to be honest with you. So eventually, out of that, I had to call for help eventually. So I got to a point where all I could do was like raise my hand up and say help. And someone came over and helped me. And what that did was that was a shattering of my ego because I tend to have this stubbornness, like a lot of people do. But I have that stubbornness that's like I'm independent. I can do anything and everything myself. I tend to have that mentality. Not so much these days after that, but it was a big part of who I thought it was. So that really shattered that. Having to be completely helpless, just reaching out and yelling for help, and I could barely get the words out. So someone came over to me because Blue Morpho is phenomenal. They have really, really great people, like really just compassionate beings that work for them. So someone came over and helped me, and I took a shower, which really helps like kind of bring you back to your body and things like that. So he helped me do that. Shout out to Sammer, by the way. And so that happened. And once I did that, once I called for help, things started to like shift for the better because my ego was shattered. So I broke that barrier. And while I was doing all this, I started to have these realizations because I noticed that I was clinging to things. I was clinging to certain ideas of what would happen during the ceremony. And there were so many constructs that I was holding on to, and they all got shattered. And one of the things that I distinctly remember, because I was like so dazed and confused, I was like, okay. And also, I didn't know if the ceremony really ended or not, so that really threw me for a loop. I'm like, I thought I was in this like circuitous loop of time, that the ceremony never really ended and I thought I would never escape it. So I had this idea of like, okay, when the sun comes back up in the morning, then I'll really know if the ceremony ended or not. But I had this realization when I had that thought, like, even that idea you can't cling to. Even that idea of the sun coming back up is an idea. And it's really hard to put into words, but I had that realization that everything we cling to is a construct. It's an idea. It's a conceptual abstraction. Everything in this physical reality. And I came to that realization or conclusion. And once I had that realization, which was so profound, I had no choice but to just let go. So that's what I did. I let go and I surrendered. And the funny thing is, right after that, one of the volunteers at Blue Morphos, Scott, I was introduced to him then when I was still like in that state, and I was rambling. I don't even know what I was rambling about, like space and time and things like that. But he just turns and looks at me and goes, "Explore the word surrender." And it's really funny because that lined up exactly with the realization that I had. That idea of letting go, not clinging on to anything because it's all illusory, and the act of surrender. So once I stopped clinging on to everything, all of these ideas and constructs and all of the fear-based things essentially, once I was able to let go and surrender, then things were all right. Then I just laid down, and next thing I knew, the sun came up, and it was the next day, and it was a pleasant after that point. So it took me so long to really assimilate that experience, and it's interesting that it was such a physical experience. It was based in action in the physical world. It wasn't just me seeing things in my head. It was me actually calling out for help. It was me like actually doing things. So it's funny how that works, and that really shattered my ego and shattered my illusion of having things to cling on to. So that is based in fear. That's why I wrote that in the poem. There's really nothing to cling to, and everything we cling to is a construct. And a lot of this has to do with the ego. So once my ego was shattered, I was able to have that realization because the ego creates these constructs, and it used these constructs to basically ensure its own survival, to ensure its own existence. So whether it be an identity that you cling to, like I'm this, I'm American, I'm strong, I'm an athlete, or I'm smart. Those are all egoic constructs that the ego tries to maintain and will defend at all costs. And then we have a bunch of conceptual ideas too. Maybe it might be a way of thinking, it might be a religion, it might be any kind of system. Those are constructs as well because they're formulated in our head. And everything in physical reality is essentially a construct. So I came to that realization, and it really helped me let go. And I've been um, it's been way more easy, way easier for me to surrender after that. So I don't have that sense that I have to control everything. Okay, and it doesn't mean being a pushover, and it doesn't mean never taking action. You can assert yourself and you can take action, but it's not from a place of trying to control everything in your reality. It's not from a place of trying to hold up these constructs. It's just a matter of flowing with the universe and going by your intuition instead of egoic shoulds and shouldn'ts and constructs and things like that. So instead of me rambling more and more about this topic, I have a challenge for you. Okay? So, the first part of this challenge is to be mindful. Be mindful of the constructs you have or the constructs you're creating. And be mindful of what ideas you're clinging to. So, what ideas, what concepts, what forms of identity are you clinging to? What future projections or scenarios in the future are you clinging to? Those are all constructs. So realize that and let go and surrender. And again, I'm not saying to never take action or to let yourself be a pushover, but realize what the things are that are constructs that you're holding on to, and flow with wherever the universe or your higher self points you, or your intuition. And don't act out of fear, act out of love. Intuitively flow instead of forcing things and resisting and trying to keep things in this vacuum, or trying to keep things in a box, or trying to keep something in your perfect little bubble that your ego wants it to be. So it's also about choosing love and letting go of fear and attachment. Okay? So a lot of this has to do with the ego. So be mindful of those egoic constructs that you are holding up. Okay? Yeah, I think that's enough for today. Peace, peace, much love, and one love, baby.